One thing that has really astounded me of my time on being on BookTube is that a lot of people love to watch videos of people reading books but don't actually read a lot themselves. Usually for a number of reasons, but the most recurring one is usually that they find it hard to get into reading. And to be honest, this was me at one point. I used to love reading as a kid, and then when I became a teenager and early adult, I then actually really hated reading because I had to read so much for my studies that I then disliked reading recreationally. But when I finished my masters, I was like, no, I actually want to get back into reading because that was such a love of mine at one point. And here we are. And now on average, I read about 70 books a year. So because it's September and people are going back to school and studying and reading a lot more, I thought now would be the perfect time on sharing my top 5 tips with you on how to get into reading. These tips are going to help you make it a regular thing in your life and also, most importantly, how to love it. And I'm genuinely going to be surprised if these don't work for you because I swear by these. So my very first tip, which I would honestly hand on heart say is most groundbreaking and helping me read more consistently, is time blocking every day. And what I mean by this is that every single day you set aside a certain amount of time that you plan to read. And I know what I'm about to say is going to sound really silly, but just stick with me. Just plan to read 5 minutes a day. And I know you're going to be like, well, 5 minutes is ridiculous. I can obviously read more than that. Okay, then do it. Time block 5 minutes a day. If you reach that amount, great. If you go over it, fantastic. But start small. Make it a daily goal just to read something that almost seems so ridiculous. It's just crazy if you don't do it. And stick to that for 1 week, or even 2, or even 3. Just make sure to make it a consistent thing to read for just 5 minutes a day. When you start to consistently find yourself reading more than 5 minutes every single day, then increase it. Do it to 10 minutes. And then when you find yourself going over 10 minutes, increase it. Make it 15. And then make it 20 and then make it 30 because reading is a skill. When you are reading, you are exercising a muscle in your brain because reading is a skill like any other. You are training your brain to read quicker. And the more you read, the more easier you'll find it to read as well. Your attention span will grow. So what started off as a very daunting 5 minutes turns into a very easy 30 minutes sooner than you think. You just have to start small, set very realistic goals, and then you can grow from there. And I would even recommend doing it at the same time every day so then you can build it into a habit. So when the certain time reaches on the clock, you're like, okay, this is my reading time. Every single day, I remember at 7 p.m., I would sit down for 15 minutes and just read nonstop. And if that time couldn't work for me, I would make sure to find another time in the day that I could do. And don't just be like, oh yeah, I'll get around to it. Make an alarm in your phone, write it down in your calendar so that you have something to tick off. So you feel that dopamine when you get through it, you can physically do something to say you've achieved it. Whatever works making you feel accountable, but I promise you, this is the very first step that's going to really help. And I know what you're thinking, this doesn't sound fun. This sounds like it's going to be a chore, the fact that I have to schedule it in. And I hear you, because it sounds like another commitment you have to make in an already busy day. But the next 4 tips I'm going to give you is going to be what makes this process enjoyable. Which brings me on to my second tip, and I know this is going to sound really obvious to some of you, but it's to read books you like. Don't think about what other people are going to say when they see you reading other books. You don't have to be reading big and pretentious and classic books to be in order to be a reader, because honestly, no one cares. Like, reading is a personal journey, and you should read books that you like. Because reading should feel exciting. You should be having fun with the books that you're reading. And if you don't know necessarily what books you like, try and think about more about your current interests. Do you do other hobbies or have other interests that you can read through books? For example, are you into history? You could be into historical fiction. If you're into certain celebrities, you could read their autobiographies or their memoirs. If you're into chick flicks, you could be reading contemporary romances. A good way I find to work this out is seeing what kind of TV shows and films you tend to watch. For me personally, I don't really like watching modern romance films, and I don't really like contemporary romance in literature either. However, I love period dramas and classic Regency romances like Pride and Prejudice, and I also find myself liking this in books as well. I also like action adventure films because they're just fast-paced and fun to watch. And I find the same thing in reading. I find it fun to read, and it also aligns with my current interests. And if you don't really know what books are out there that aligns with your current interests, then honey, we have the internet. You can find this out. You have YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Goodreads. You have so many platforms at the touch of your fingers where you can find out so many books that would align with your interests. There is so much content online on very specific book recommendations for you on very niche interests. Even even on my channel, I make videos on books for certain TV shows and films that people like. For example, I recently made a video on books you might like if you enjoyed the new Superman film. There is countless of other videos like this that exist online that you can find. And this brings me on to my third tip, in that if you're still stumped on what to read, don't worry. I understand that there's so much choice out there that it can be a little bit paralyzing, especially when you don't really know what genres you're actually into already. And in this case, my next tip would genuinely be to read short and easy books. And no, it's not a cop-out reading short books, because no one cares about what you're reading. Sometimes I'm exhausted, and the last thing I want to do is read through a long and difficult book. Sometimes I fancy just a quick and short book that I can read in one sitting, because sometimes it's just more fun. And I'm definitely more of a mood reader. I pick up just what I'm feeling in that moment rather than planning out what books I want to read. So it's okay to read a book that's under 100 pages because that's all you can manage. I actually made a couple of videos on short books that you can read that I'll link in the description below. And also, I know some people might think this is crazy, but I genuinely recommend reading children's books and young adult fiction. Even though we do not support J.K. Rowling on this channel, if you like the Harry Potter films, genuinely read the Harry Potter books. I actually read the books after watching the films, and it really helps you read because you kind of already have that visualization from the films in your head. So it really helps build that muscle when you're reading, because you're kind of already visualizing it, and it makes it easier to read the books as you're going through. When I actually started getting into reading, I read the Percy Jackson series, which I had never seen the films before, so the material was completely new to me. And it was such a fun and enjoyable series to read. Like, yes, I was times reading it being like, oh, this is obviously for kids, but it still made it enjoyable to read. Those 15 minutes that I time blocked every single day just flew by, and I ended up reading more because I was genuinely interested in the fast-paced plot. So I would honestly recommend this to be a great way to get into books initially. Read short, easy ones, recommended for kids or young adults. They're fun and quick to get through, and they can spark your love for reading without it feeling overwhelming. However, there may not always be a book that you're reading that you're enjoying, and this brings me on to my fourth tip, which is it's okay to not finish books. In the book community, we even have a term for this. It's called DNF, which means did not finish. Because if you're reading a book that you're not enjoying, it's okay to not see it till the end. I know this is really hypocritical for me to say because I personally don't DNF, but that's because I'm stubborn and I have the hope that the book gets better as it goes on. Plus, I have a booktube where I review books, and I feel like my ratings and reviews have a little bit more weight if I see the book to the end, so I can actually give an overall opinion on it because I finished it. But if you're initially wanting to get into reading and you pick up a book you don't like, it's not that deep if you don't finish it. The author's not going to come to your door banging it down asking, why on earth did you not finish my book? Because there's been so many times personally where I've read bad books that's honestly put me into a reading slump afterwards, where I'm so unmotivated that I actually don't want to pick up another book. Like, it happens to us all. And you don't have to completely give up on a book if you decide to stop reading it. You can just put a bookmark in it and say, I'll pick this up later when I'm in a different mood for it. Because even though I don't DNF, I actually sometimes do this. Sometimes I'll get 50 pages into a book and I'm like, I'm really not feeling this at the moment. And I'll put a bookmark in it and shelve it, and I'll be like, I'll come back to this book when I'm in a different headspace for it. Because for me personally, I said I was a mood reader. It is literally being in certain moods for certain books, and I know that I enjoy things more when I'm in very different headspaces for them. So if you're reading a book and you find yourself really not clicking with it, it's okay to put it down and start another one. Which very conveniently brings me on to my fifth and final tip, which honestly I would recommend for you to own many books. Have a vast range around you. And I know that some people may find this strange and think that they should only buy and read a certain book at a time, but honestly I kind of see my book collection kind of like having a wine cellar. Sometimes depending on your mood you may be feeling different tastes. One day you may not be feeling having a dry wine and instead be feeling something lighter and a bit more fruity instead. And if you force yourself to drink the dry wine because you think, well, I have this here and I have to have it, then you won't enjoy the experience because you'll be wishing that you had something else. And honestly, the same goes for books. As a mood reader, I have a lot of books and I just decided what I want to read on a book by book basis. Yes, I make books of what I want to read per season, but I don't really force myself to read all of them if I'm not feeling them. They're more just aspirational because they feel like the kind of thing that I want to read that season. But if I fancy reading a different book then and there, then I'll do it. I'll just pick up that book because guess what? It's me who's going to be reading it and I want to read what I want. And by reading what you want, it therefore makes reading fun because as soon as you feel forced to read read something, it takes the joy out of it. And I honestly think that's why I fell out of love of reading in the first place, is because going to school and going to university where you're required to read so much different material that you don't want to, you end up very much disliking the process because it can be quite a chore. And another mini tip, I guess, that comes off this one, so I guess you could count this one as like a bonus tip, which I know that some people may disagree with, but I genuinely stick by this if you're starting out reading. And it's to read multiple books at once. And I know what you're thinking. You're going to think, well, reading one book is hard enough. How am I going to read multiple? Just hear me out. I don't personally read multiple books at once now, but for example, I do watch multiple TV shows at once. I usually have one series on the go that's a bit more heavy and darker, and the episodes are longer and they tackle more deeper themes. And I also have like a lighter one that's shorter episodes, more fun, usually a sitcom, puts me in a better mood. Because sometimes I'll come home from an awful day at work and I'll be like, I don't really want to watch something that's really going to depress me more. I'd rather want something light and fun. And honestly, it's the same with reading. One day you might come home and you don't really want to read a book because it's got some really quite heavy themes, or you're just not really feeling it and you'd rather pick up something else. But you don't have to completely not read the book or DNF it. You can just have multiple on a go. I would recommend having like 2 or 3, no more than that, and just pick up whichever one you feel like reading at the time. Because it's a great way to read for your mood, and having many options just makes it easier to read consistently. And you might be thinking, oh, but I'll probably forget what's happening in one book when I go to another. And honestly, I don't think you will, because do you do that for TV shows? I don't. I remembered the TV show I'm watching as I'm watching it because it's so different from the others. When you finally get a bit more into reading and you find that you've started to train that muscle more where you can pay attention to reading, you can then stick to one book because it's easier to see it out. But I honestly think in the initial stages, try 2-3 books at once and see how you feel with it. You might not like it, you can then just stick to one, but I think this is a good way for reading for your mood and to make it more fun. But my overall point for this video is that reading is your own personal journey and you should find a way to make it work for you. I'm here to give advice and to give you the tips that I found that genuinely helped me when I first started reading, but you don't have to listen to any of these. This is just general advice that you can pick and choose what you like from. I've also seen these tips work for other people, especially in the very early stages of reading if you find yourself really struggling to get into books. I also would recommend not setting book goals and reading a certain amount of books a year. I feel like it takes the fun out of it because it feels like you're having to meet a deadline. So setting a task of like 30-40 books a year can feel more pressurizing than fun. Yes, I read 70 books a year, but I never actually set reading goals for myself. Even now, I just read when I want and I just hit whatever number I end up hitting. I can make a video later on how to read more books in a year because I get asked a lot of questions on how I read so much. But I wanted to start off with something very easy for this video because honestly, reading isn't as big of a thing as people make out. And remember, at the end of the day, reading is meant to be fun. It is a hobby. You need to make it enjoyable for you, and it does not matter what anybody else thinks. And to end this video, I'm going to leave you with a quote that I've been thinking about a lot lately because I really do think it's true, and it's read what you love until you love to read. Because I honestly think that everyone has the capacity to enjoy reading. You just need to find the right books for you. And on those stunning words of wisdom, I hope you enjoyed this video. I really hope you find these tips helpful. If you do, please drop a like down below. It really means the world to me. And better yet, please write in the comments below any tips or advice that you have when you started your reading journey that you found genuinely to be helpful. I know when I watch videos like this, I always go to the comment section, so I'm sure other people watching will find your advice really helpful. If you're also new here, please let me know what questions you have in terms of how to get into reading. I respond to all my comments and I love reading them, so feel free to drop one down below. And if you're new here, feel free to subscribe. I make videos all about books and bookish content. Feel free to also follow me on my socials. I have a Goodreads where I update in real time when I'm reading, and feel free to also follow me on my Instagram. I post more personal stuff on there, but I also post the books I finished reading, letting you know what they're about and what I rated them out of 10. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate all my returning subscribers that come back and watch me consistently. I love you so much. I've been really busy with work and life the past few weeks, so I've been a little bit struggling to make videos, but I'm trying to keep on top of it because I know how much you guys like them. But your love and support really means the world to me. So thank you so much for being here. I love you, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.